The viewport editor is a tool that helps you see the changes made to your HDRI in real time. It also updates a lower resolution HDRI so you can see how the lighting looks in your scene before making that final bake. First, ensure the Show Overlays is enabled. Then, go to Stratus, Rendering, Viewport, and click Start Viewport Editor. This will take a moment the first time you boot up, as Stratus is initializing shaders and textures. After Stratus has initialized, there will be a new world shader with the Stratus Sky Environment texture. Pixel size, much like in Cycles, controls how large the pixels are when rendering the sky. Since Stratus is a really intense shader, this is a useful tool to save performance. Environment texture size controls how large the environment texture is when using the viewport editor. It's best to keep the resolution low, since we want real-time feedback when editing our skies. Both max steps and max lighting steps controls the maximum number of steps taken while moving through both cloud layers. Increasing the number of steps will improve the quality of the cloud visuals, but it will also result in longer render times. Generally, we want to keep these numbers low so we get good performance, but sometimes it's nice to see what things will look like with a higher step count. You can find both the bake and render animation operators under Render. The bake operator simply bakes an HDRI using the rendering settings below. Before baking, it's a good idea to disable the viewport editor, since making any changes to the Stratus settings or changing a frame will overwrite the final bake. You can find the baked HDRI in Blender's images with the name Stratus_ENV_TEX. The render animation operator will bake an HDRI for each frame. If you want to animate the Stratus HDRI, you must use this operator to render your animation. Due to how Stratus was built and how Blender works, you cannot use Blender's render animation. The only limitation of the render operator is that Blender will be unresponsive when rendering, and you cannot use video output formats such as AVI JPEG, AVI RAW, or FFmpeg video. Environment texture size, much like in the viewport editor, controls how large the environment texture is for our final bake. Rendering the HDRI as tiles can help reduce memory usage and prevent GPU stalling by rendering smaller portions of the image at a time. Generally, this is useful when working with large image sizes like 8K, 16K, or 24K. But depending on your hardware, it could be beneficial to use at all resolutions. The tile size will be a square of pixels. So for example, 512 will be 512 pixels by 512 pixels. If the tile size is too big, for instance, if you render at 1K with a tile size of 1024 or 2048, then tiling will be automatically disabled. Note that the tile size can also be too small, like when rendering at 8K with a tile size of 512. That would be a total of 128 tiles. That's a lot of overhead, and Stratus can perform much slower. Bicubic sampling is a way to preserve the fine details when magnifying textures. The result is a smoother and more accurate image, at the cost of 4 to 8 more samples. Since bicubic sampling is very expensive, it's best to avoid unless absolutely needed. Bilinear artifacts will generally show up when using the serial cloud layer when the size is completely maxed out. Just like in the viewport settings, increasing the max steps and max light steps will improve the quality of the cloud visuals, but it will also result in longer render times. The ideal number of steps will vary depending on cloud size, thickness, density, and other factors. So once you have achieved the desired cloud appearance, go in and fine-tune the number of steps to strike a balance between rendering speed and visual quality.